Imagine waking up in the middle of the night, drenched in cold sweat. You've just had a strange dream. Maybe it was something absurd, talking animals, sunken cities, or an endless labyrinth from which there is no escape. Or perhaps someone appeared to you, someone you had long forgotten, or even someone you had never known. Here was something odd about this dream. The details were too vivid, the emotions too real. It felt like this dream was important. But what exactly was it trying to tell you? You sit up in bed, glancing around in the darkness. Your heart is still pounding, and fragments of the dream flicker through your mind like flashes of light. It has left behind a trace, an elusive feeling of unease, or, on the contrary, a mysterious calm. You shake it off. Just a dream, nothing more. A silly trick of the imagination, but what if it's not? What if this dream wasn't random? What if it was trying to convey something important? But where do dreams even come from? Who creates them? You believe you control your life, that your thoughts, actions, and desires belong to you. But what if something hidden in the depths of your mind is at work? Something that governs you even when you think you are making choices on your own. Now imagine that your dreams are not just a random collection of images, but an encrypted message, a code left for you. But by whom? What if an ancient mind is speaking to you through them? A mind that exists beyond time, a mind connected to the entire history of humanity. Within it are ancient symbols, emotions, and experiences passed down through generations. It is the collective unconscious, a vast, boundless ocean of meaning that connects people to one another. Dreams are the voice of this depth. Dreams are ancient knowledge embedded in us long before we were born. Have you ever wondered why the same images appear in myths and legends of completely different cultures? Why does every person have an idea of a hero, a monster, a wise old man, or a savior? Why do people all over the world fear the darkness? Why does the same image keep appearing in your dreams from time to time? Jung claimed this was no coincidence. He said that within each of us lives an invisible playwright, the one who creates our fears, our desires, and our fantasies. But who is he? Is it you or someone else? One man was not afraid to peer into this abyss. He dedicated his entire life to it. Carl Gustav Jung, a man who claimed that inside each of us lives something greater than just the I. He argued that if you do not recognize your shadow, it will take control of you, that your fears, your desires, your actions, they are not always your own decisions, that within every person lie archetypes that shape their destiny. This is the story of a brilliant psychiatrist who was called either a prophet or a madman, the story of a man who found a way to converse with his own soul and claimed he could teach anyone to do the same, the awakening of a seeker. Carl Gustav Jung was born on July 26, 1875, in the small Swiss town of Kesswil, into the family of a pastor. It was a time when religion still held sway, but science was beginning to take root in people's minds. His father, Paul Jung, was a Protestant priest, a devout man, but not deeply engaged in theology. He simply did his job, preaching, baptizing, hearing confessions. But even as a child, Carl sensed something was off. He saw how his father grew more disillusioned with his faith each day, how his sermons became mechanical, how he lost interest in the God he was supposed to believe in with all his heart. Jung recalled once asking his father, "Dad, do you actually believe in what you preach?" His father hesitated, his gaze dimmed, and he said, "You just have to believe, son." But Jung was not satisfied with such answers. From an early age, he felt that there was something more, something hidden, ancient, inexplicable, and soon he would begin to encounter it directly. Jung recalled an incident from his childhood. One day, while walking near a church, he suddenly had a terrifying vision. He saw something monstrous, a giant divine excrement falling from the sky and crashing onto the church's dome. The image was so vivid, so real, that he froze in fear. Why did I see this? Was it my imagination or something coming from outside? Later, he would realize that this vision symbolized the collapse of traditional religion. It was his unconscious mind showing him that God was not as people imagined him to be, that there was something else, something much deeper, something far more mysterious. But as a child, he was simply afraid. He feared that an angry God would punish him for such thoughts. But no punishment came. And that was when he first understood. Thoughts come on their own. They do not belong to us. They emerge from somewhere deep within. And this realization haunted him. Jung grew up in solitude. He had almost no friends. He was distant, withdrawn, unable to understand why the people around him behaved as if nothing extraordinary was happening. He felt like he was living in two realities at once: the ordinary world, where everything followed a routine, where people believed in God but did not feel his presence, where each day was the same as the last. The world of dreams, visions, strange symbols, and voices, a world that spoke to him when he was alone. At the age of 12, he experienced another mysterious event. While standing in the schoolyard, he suddenly lost consciousness. It seemed like he had collapsed for no reason, but something inside him felt broken. When he woke up, he realized he was different now. That was the moment he became aware of his individuality, his separation from others. It was then that I understood I had two selves, one that people saw and another deeper, ancient, hidden within me. He called it the experience of the second self. From that moment, he knew he had an inner life, one far more important than the external world. As a child, Jung was often tormented by nightmares. One of them remained etched in his memory. He saw an underground cave. Inside, on a pedestal, stood a colossal being, not a man, not an animal. Its body was covered in scales, and instead of a head, it had a single enormous eye. A voice told him, "This is the king of the underworld." Jung woke up in terror. Later, he realized that this dream symbolized his first encounter with the depths of the unconscious. It was his first glimpse into the abyss that he would one day fully explore. One of the strangest events of his childhood was the secret doll story. When Jung was about 10 years old, he secretly carved a small wooden figurine, dressed it in a red robe, and hid it in a box in the attic. He would sneak up to it, whisper his thoughts to it, confide in it. Years later, he realized this doll was his projection, his alter ego. He felt that the figurine was also him, but different. It was not just a child's game. It was an archetype of the self, a deep part of his personality that would later become the foundation of his theory. Jung always sensed something dark within himself. He feared that there was something inside him he did not understand. Sometimes he felt strange desires, aggression, inexplicable thoughts rising within him. What is this? Is it me or something foreign? Later, he would understand that this was his shadow, the hidden, unconscious part of his personality that a person refuses to acknowledge. He began recording and analyzing his dreams. He studied myths, legends, and fairy tales, and found the same symbols everywhere: the monster, the hero, the old sage, the mother, the demon. These images appeared not only in his dreams, but in stories from around the world. That's when he asked himself the most important question: what if dreams are not just fantasies? What if something ancient speaks through them? 1907, Vienna, a young and ambitious Carl Gustav Jung arrives in Austria for the first time to meet the man he admiringly calls the Great Freud. At this time, Sigmund Freud was already a renowned scientist, the founder of psychoanalysis, the pioneer of the unconscious. His ideas were considered revolutionary, but he had not yet gained widespread recognition. Jung was fascinated by Freud. He saw him as a guide into the world of the unconscious. He read his works, admired his research, and applied psychoanalysis in clinical practice. When they finally met, their conversation lasted 13 hours without interruption. Freud was thrilled. He saw in Jung his successor, his prince, the one who would carry on his work. He began promoting Jung in academic circles, appointing him as the president of the International Psychoanalytic Association. Jung deeply admired Freud. He was grateful to him. He felt that Freud was his spiritual father. But deep inside, Jung was already beginning to doubt. Freud saw the unconscious as a repository of repressed sexual desires. Everything, from childhood traumas to religious experiences, he explained through the lens of libido. But Jung felt this was too narrow an understanding of the human psyche. Yes, sexuality is important, but is there nothing more to a person? Is human behavior driven only by this? Jung noticed that the same symbols, the same stories, archetypes, appeared in dreams, myths, and religions, transcending mere sexual attraction. One day, during one of their discussions, Jung tried to explain to Freud that the human unconscious was far deeper than just libido. Freud sharply replied, "Libido is everything. There is no other explanation, and there can be none." Jung disagreed, but Freud did not tolerate opposition. He saw any critique as personal betrayal. Jung began to realize that Freud did not want to see beyond what he had already discovered. The breaking point. The strangest, most mystical moment in their relationship occurred in 1909. They were arguing again. Jung insisted that the human psyche contained much more than just repressed desires. Freud, irritated, responded, "Jung, I beg you, never delve into occult ideas. They will destroy our science." Jung looked at him and said, "Fine, but right now something strange will happen in this room, and you will feel it." At that moment, a loud crack echoed through the room, as if an invisible force had struck the cabinet. Freud turned pale. Jung calmly said, "See? This is exactly what I was talking about." Freud began to tremble. He tried to dismiss what had happened, but within minutes he fainted. This was the turning point. From that moment on, Freud began to fear Jung. He realized that Jung was not just a scientist. He was someone who looked into places Freud was afraid to explore. Freud distanced himself from Jung. Jung, in turn, delved deeper into the study of mythology, alchemy, religion, and shamanism. The final break. In 1912, Jung published his work Symbols of Transformation, in which he completely rejected Freud's sexual dogma. In response, Freud cut all ties with him. He wrote a cold letter. "You have betrayed me. You have betrayed psychoanalysis. I do not wish to know you anymore." From that moment, Jung became an outcast in the scientific community. But despite this, it was then that he truly began his own path, which would lead to the creation of analytical psychology. Years passed. Freud and Jung never spoke again. They never saw each other in person. But in 1913, at an international congress, they accidentally ended up in the same room. They looked at each other. Their eyes met, but neither of them said a word. That was their silent farewell. Freud died in 1939. Jung outlived him by 22 years, and only once recalling Freud, he quietly said he was a great man, but he did not allow himself to see that beyond his discoveries lay an entire universe. Jung's descent into the unconscious. After breaking with Freud in 1912, Jung went through a deep personal and professional crisis. His colleagues turned away from him. Many saw him as a traitor to psychoanalysis. But the worst part was not that. He began hearing voices. He was haunted by strange visions. dark figures, fantastical creatures, terrifying images, and he didn't understand. Was he exploring his unconscious or losing his mind? Instead of rejecting it, Jung decided to dive into the depths of his own psyche. He developed the technique of active imagination, a method of deliberately entering an altered state of consciousness. What did Jung do? He entered a meditative state but remained aware. He allowed himself to dive into dreams and visions, recording them in his journal. He literally conversed with his unconscious as if it were a living entity. He did not just analyze images, he engaged with them, argued, and asked them questions. Who did Jung meet in these visions? One day, during one of these journeys into the depths of his psyche, Jung encountered a strange being, an old man with bird-like wings. The figure introduced itself as Philemon, an ancient sage, not just an image, but an independent personality. Philemon told Jung, "You think your thoughts belong to you, but they do not. They belong to the world." Jung was shocked. This entity was not just a product of his imagination, it existed as a separate being. Later, Jung realized that Philemon was his animus, his wise old man archetype, his deep unconscious speaking to him in symbols. But this was only the beginning. The vision of war. In 1913, just months before World War I, Jung had a terrifying vision. He saw all of Europe covered in blood, dead bodies, burning cities, rivers flooded with crimson fire. He felt overwhelming dread. It was not just a dream, it was a warning, as if the collective unconscious already knew that catastrophe was coming. Months later, the war began. Jung realized all of humanity is connected through an invisible network, the collective unconscious. What one person feels, millions can feel too. The Red Book, Jung's greatest secret. For 6 years, Jung meticulously recorded all his experiences in the unconscious. These records became an illustrated manuscript, the Red Book. Why the Red Book? It was bound in thick red leather. Red is the color of life and death, of alchemy, of transformation. Jung never published it during his lifetime. It was too personal, too strange, too mystical. In this book, he recorded his conversations with archetypes, spirits, and symbols. One of the most famous passages reads, "I stood on the edge of the abyss and looked down. There was darkness. There was my soul. And then I heard a voice. If you want to live, you must descend. I descended. And there I met a monster. It was me. It said, 'You have feared me all your life, but I am you.'" This was the moment he recognized the shadow, the dark side of the personality that one refuses to acknowledge, but only by accepting it can one become whole. How ancient symbols control our lives. What is the collective unconscious? Imagine the human psyche as a vast ocean. On the surface lies our consciousness, what we think, remember, and are aware of. But beneath the surface hides the depth of the unconscious, a primordial world of images, symbols, and ideas that live within us, even if we are unaware of them. Carl Jung called this layer of the psyche the collective unconscious. It is not something personal to us, but is passed down from generation to generation, from ancestors to descendants. It is humanity's ancient memory, encoded in symbols, myths, and dreams. This is where archetypes live, primordial images that shape our psyche. Archetypes, the invisible architects of our psyche. An archetype is a universal image or symbol that appears in dreams, myths, religions, and art. Jung believed that archetypes are the prototypes of all stories, heroes, fears, and dreams found across different cultures. They shape our behavior, emotions, and destiny. They appear in our dreams. They make us instinctively recognize who is the hero and who is the villain. We may not consciously acknowledge them, but they influence everything we do. One of Jung's greatest fascinations was alchemy. He realized that ancient alchemists, when describing the transformation of metals into gold, were actually speaking about the transformation of the soul. The process of individuation, the path to wholeness, was hidden in alchemical texts. The black stage, the dissolution of personality crisis; the white stage, recognizing one's shadow; the red stage, the birth of a new self, transformation. Alchemy became the key for Jung to understand the human psyche. After years of exploring the abyss of the unconscious, he finally surfaced, but he was no longer the same. He had undergone his own transformation. He realized that a human being is not just an I, but a combination of many forces and archetypes. He understood that the unconscious could warn about future events. He saw that without recognizing the shadow, a person would suffer from inner conflicts forever. This experience became the foundation of analytical psychology. After Jung's death, his family feared publishing the Red Book. It seemed too strange, too mystical, too insane. It contradicted the image of Jung as a scientist. They kept it hidden for nearly 100 years. Only in 2009 was the Red Book finally published, revealing to the world the true Jung, the man who gazed into the abyss and returned. The shadow archetype, the dark side of personality. The shadow is everything we suppress within ourselves. It includes our fears, desires, and complexes. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Examples of the shadow in culture: Darth Vader, Star Wars, a hero consumed by his shadow; Gollum, the Lord of the Rings, the embodiment of repressed greed and fear; Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, the duality of personality, the battle with the shadow. A person who does not acknowledge their shadow risks becoming its victim. The hero archetype, the one who faces trials. The hero is someone who confronts hardships, endures pain and suffering, but ultimately finds themselves. Jung called this process individuation, the path to wholeness. Examples of the hero: Frodo, the Lord of the Rings, weak but capable of great deeds; Harry Potter, a young man who discovers his destiny; Neo, the Matrix, a hero who must understand who he truly is; the wise old man. Archetype, a guide on the path to truth. The wise old man is a mentor, a person who helps the hero understand the truth. Examples: Gandalf, the Lord of the Rings, a guide in the world of magic; Yoda, Star Wars, the keeper of ancient wisdom; Merlin, the eternal archetype of the wizard mentor. But the wise man does not give direct answers. He pushes the hero toward self-discovery. Archetypes in dreams. What do our dreams mean? Jung believed that dreams are not just random images, but messages from the unconscious. If you dream that, you are chasing someone. You may be searching for a lost part of yourself. You are running away. You might be avoiding your shadow. You meet a stranger. This could be your anima or animus. You are drowning. Your subconscious is showing that you are overwhelmed by emotions. Jung advised keeping a dream journal and analyzing recurring symbols. Archetypes control us unknowingly. If a person does not recognize their shadow, it will control them. If a person does not follow the hero's journey, they will remain stuck in routine and fear. Recognizing archetypes gives power over one's destiny. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Become aware of your archetypes and you will gain control over your life. How Jung explained personality development. What is the shadow? Imagine that someone else lives inside you. Not a monster, not an evil twin, not a supernatural spirit. It is your shadow. The shadow is the part of us that we do not want to see. Carl Gustav Jung. The shadow is everything we reject in ourselves: fears, desires that seem unacceptable, feelings we suppress, dark sides of our character. But the more we reject our shadow, the more it controls us. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Where does the shadow come from? The shadow is formed in childhood. A child is born whole, complete. But then society begins to impose rules of what is good and bad. Good boys don't get angry. Good girls shouldn't be selfish. You must not be afraid. The child starts suppressing the parts of themselves that others do not accept. But they do not disappear. They go into the shadow. How does the shadow manifest in life? You judge others for what exists within yourself. For example, a person who hates liars may often lie themselves without realizing it. You lose control for no reason. Sometimes anger bursts out uncontrollably. This is the shadow, tired of being suppressed. You feel envious if someone provokes strong envy in you. They might simply be reflecting a repressed part of yourself. You attract people who mirror your shadow. For instance, if a person suppresses their aggression, they may constantly encounter aggressive people. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Jung. How to confront your shadow. Jung said, the shadow does not disappear if we ignore it. It can only be recognized and integrated. Step 1. Acknowledging the shadow. What traits in others annoy you? What qualities do you suppress in yourself? What desires do you consider unacceptable? Step 2. Accepting the shadow. Stop fearing it. Realize that the shadow is a part of you, but not your entire personality. Step 3. Integrating the shadow. Use the shadow's energy for good. For example, aggression can be transformed into strength for protecting yourself and your loved ones. You don't need to destroy your shadow. You need to befriend it. How Jung changed the world. Carl Gustav Jung was not just a psychologist. He was someone who explored the darkest corners of the human soul and discovered universal laws governing consciousness. Today, his ideas are used not only in psychology, but also in art, cinema, literature, philosophy, religion, and even business. The one who looks outside dreams. The one who looks inside awakens. Jung awakened millions. Jung gave the world a key to understanding the psyche, but this key can only be used in one case. You must be ready to look inside yourself. You can forget this text and continue living as before, or you can start exploring your shadow, studying your archetypes, understanding what controls you, and then you will be able to control yourself. The one who looks outside dreams. The one who looks inside awakens. Jung showed us the path, but we must walk it ourselves. Carl Gustav Jung didn't just change psychology. He changed the way we see ourselves. He proved that a person is not just a collection of thoughts and emotions. Inside us, an entire universe exists. But the most important thing Jung revealed: you are not the master of your fate until you realize what controls you. Jung did not offer easy solutions. He never said, just be happy. He said, know your shadow, accept it, and then you will find your path. You can keep living thinking you already know yourself, but now you know the truth. Inside you, there are forces you have yet to realize. They control you, but you can control them. And here is the main question. Are you ready to look inside yourself? Are you ready to discover who you truly are? Now everything depends on you. Are you ready to dive into the depths of your soul? Leave a comment with your thoughts. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like.